Perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be here. Marty, thank you for the invitation. Thrilled to be part of this event. I am Dave Whelan. I'm the CEO of an organization called BioscienceLA, which is a nonprofit organization in Los Angeles, funded by Los Angeles County, as well as Amgen, hospitals like City of Hope, Cedars-Sinai, other philanthropists, Pharma Trade Association, to really grow and strengthen the life sciences ecosystem, healthcare innovation ecosystem, biotech, medtech, digital health, even delivery of healthcare in the greater LA region. I've lived in LA for 20 years, but I lived in the Bay Area for 10 years before that. I used to work right around the corner from Hambrecht and Quist. So whenever I come to San Francisco for the JP Morgan conference, it's kind of cool to think back to the H&Q conference days. So I'm older than I look, but anyway, when I kick things off, we're gonna try to keep this really casual and interactive. And we've got healthcare, outlook on healthcare, where is healthcare going, which is, we could probably spend a week talking about that. So we're gonna do it all in less than an hour. So I'm gonna ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves in a minute, just a little bit about who they are, how they got here, what they're doing, and then we'll kind of dig into some questions. And happy to open up to audience questions on the way as well. Vamsi, I'm going to start with you since you're behind me on the screen, so I don't want to forget about you. So this way, at least I'll ask you one question. So if you could introduce yourself, take a minute or two, and just tell us who you are.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vamsi Maddipatla. I'm an investor and founder of two organizations. One is LAXAI, which is a contract research and development organization, and we call ourselves as a CRDMO. We support global pharma and biotech companies develop, actually do the entire R&D and then develop the molecule, and we also support them even in commercialization, marketing the actual compound. The other company is Clinovo. We support again biopharmaceutical companies with digital health solutions to accelerate clinical trials with a varied bunch of technologies as well as resources. And we operate in a global delivery model with US and India. My background, I'm an engineer by profession, worked with Pfizer, J&J, worked in Wall Street with Merrill Lynch, and started a company focused on regulatory compliance solutions in the digital space, and sold that in 2010. And then invested into LAXAI, and then actually bought out all the shareholders in 2017, and then been scaling this business. Thank you.
All right, terrific. Thanks. I love that you've got the operator side, the investor side, the bio side, the digital side. So it'll be good to kind of connect the dots on all of this. Let's just go down the line and tell us about that.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kian Beyzavi. I am a board member, an investor, and an advisor operator. So most recently, I was a venture partner at Coda Capital, a multi-stage, multi-sector investment firm where I was leading our investments in health tech. And my training is in electrical engineering and applied physics. I did a PhD and started my career at McKinsey, where I was one of the leaders in the healthcare practice. And for about 20 years beyond that, I worked as an executive across different medtech and life sciences, Medtronic, Abbott Diabetes, and Novartis. And then also I ran a consulting company focused on innovation in life sciences. I put myself through college as an undergrad research assistant in the medical school. And even though I was studying engineering, I was working in a biochemistry lab. And so the overlap of technology and medicine became the focal point of my career. And that's what I've been focusing on. I'm really excited about emerging technologies like AI, wearables, real world evidence, analytics, to apply those to solving problems in healthcare.
Perfect, thank you. Lena?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lena Kannappan. I'm the co-founder and head of strategic partnerships for Healthcare Triangle. In my background, I started off in 90s working on nuclear control systems. After 9/11, I got the opportunity to chair multiple committees in defining digital identity. Then I founded my security startup and then sold it to one of the very early partners of Amazon Web Services. We built a cloud business, but primarily we pivoted to healthcare as early as 2014. We've been really focusing on next generation information technology for in healthcare, supporting both hospitals and life sciences companies. Since then, it's been a great journey working with Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud and Microsoft in this space. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Great, thank you. Divya.
Hi. Thank you, Marty, for the opportunity. First of all, great to be here with the panelists. My name is Divya Yerraguntla. I actually started off with management consulting, very similar to Kia, but found my way into pharma. I had a master's in applied math, went back to school, got my MBA in strategic management and marketing, full-time pharma, worked with companies like Johnson & Johnson, Novo Nordisk, Sun Pharma, and recently moved into Syneos Health, which is a product development company. So it does everything end-to-end from clinical trials all the way into commercialization. It's a global company with about 29,000 employees. So we do everything pretty similar to what Vamsi was saying. So a combination of a lot of different backgrounds. But my passion is really being close to the patients and getting therapies closer to them. So that's really something that has motivated me along the way. So I picked up a lot of different skill sets along the way, digital technology, and then pharma.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we're definitely going to talk about the financial side of things in a little bit, but I really want to kick it off with technology. I think there's a common theme of technology, innovation, and some really interesting cross sections, as we said, of biotech, medtech, digital health in this group. And so, and we are, let's say we're coming out of the pandemic. This is the first time that we've all been together here in San Francisco for JP Morgan since 2020. So I'm going to say, we're moving on, but during the past couple of years, we've seen some real advances in telehealth, in technologies for mental health, remote patient monitoring, diagnostic tests, at-home healthcare. All of those really grew during pandemic, both because of pandemic and kind of the floodgates have opened. And so would love everyone's thoughts and just kind of outlook on those areas, or what else are you looking at? You mentioned AI as well, which I think fits into all of this. So just where do you see all this coming together and continuing to grow?
Yeah, thank you. So exactly like you said, the pandemic really unleashed this whole field of telehealth that really accelerated the adoption of it. And the genie is out of the bottle. So now a lot of patients now, I think like close to half patients have had telehealth visits, which is a massive increase. But some of the themes that I'm really excited about, the first one is computational biology. The second is medtech and medicine at the edge. And then finally, advances in life sciences tools and diagnostics. So I feel like the technology has advanced so much, and we have such a convergence of data from so many different sources, from phenotypical data in electronic medical records, from genomics data, from wearables, so that we can apply our machine learning and advances in AI to really make sense out of this data and be able to model human biology and understand it in a way that we couldn't do before. And together with that, we can then design drugs that are far more personalized, and they can meet multiple pathways in the physiology of a human to address the unmet needs of diseases. There's also AI-enabled drug discovery and in silico trials that is really exciting. So we are with protein folding and modeling the different drug pathways. We can advance our understanding and design of medications. Medicine at the edge is a really interesting concept. There are a lot of wearables out there, and all the data needs to get beamed into the cloud, but that creates a delay. So we are seeing a lot more computation being done where the data is being collected and where it's being used. So for instance, one of the companies we invested in, Active Surgical, has an AI-enabled guidance platform that provides real-time guidance and support to the surgeon in the operating room. So it collects the data, it runs the analytics on the spot, and then it can spit back results of where to go and how to operate. And then finally, advances in life sciences tools and diagnostics. We are seeing sequencing at a single cell level. We are seeing a lot of proteomics and multiomics. So this abundance of data together with the technologies that we mentioned is really exciting in terms of not just advancing incrementally, but suddenly bringing paradigm shift in the way we understand and address disease.
Awesome. That's you hit on all the topics. So just I would love to go down the line and get everyone's thoughts.
Yeah, I want to just continue from what she was really articulating there. I think many things after pandemic, I think, Dave talked about telehealth and also virtual care at home. But one simple use case that comes to my mind is in 2020, New York Times wrote an article about, that 80 to 90% of the hospitals, clinics in this country still use fax machines. So there was a major challenge in terms of sharing information with CDC when it came to contact tracing. So that's one area that I see that in the last year and a half or 2 years, with the advent of cloud providers and big data analytics platforms, that there are solutions out there where you do the OCR and take the PDFs of these fax documents, hundreds and hundreds, maybe in millions of documents, and then you store this information on the cloud, and then you classify and extract whether it's patient record information, which is available in these fax documents, or referrals, or even all sort of lab records and all of that. What the companies are doing now is to analyze this information and then eventually try to address challenges around prior auth, sort of entire chain, the value chain, between payers and providers. And at the end, they integrate back to Epic on-prem, electronic health records on-prem. So we see this hybrid, model where you are able to address this, automating the document workflow challenges at the same time directly impacting the healthcare outcomes or patient outcomes. That's just in one example, but there are several things happening. I think one other thing I should say, in the last pandemic times, in the last 2 years, there is a huge uptake on ransomware, right? 2/3 of the hospital organizations are now dealing with this major challenge. And since 2020, it has gone up like 94%. So the hospitals are looking at running their systems, backup and disaster recovery on major cloud providers that I'm closely associated with. I think this is, people are looking at, how do we really encrypt data but not get caught up in this ransomware situations. So this is where we want to extract data from previous in time and, address the recovery objectives for the hospital scenarios. I mean, those are two examples I can,
Wow, and the ransomware angle is, I don't want to say it's interesting, it's scary, right? And we've seen this with, with towns and cities as well, and sort of all of our data, financial data, and personal data, healthcare data is all very much at risk, which is it's a little bit scary.
So really great points, but both Lena and Kian. Two things that do come to mind that I would like to add is, one is the data aspect and the other is the AI aspect. One aspect of AI that we don't talk as much is it's not as sexy to talk about, I guess, is the fact that we are doing a lot of diagnostics using AI, but there are some countries, like there's this use case published by Google AI. I think they worked with Arvind hospitals in India, where there is a lack of ophthalmologists. And so they did this AI model where they did 128,000 ophthalmologists, looked at all the images, and then they ran the model through 12,000 images. And it was 97.5% accuracy for diabetes retinopathy, which is a issue, as we just talked about in the previous session, obesity is an issue. Obesity is very closely related to diabetes, and it's a rice-eating country, so you have high rates of diabetes retinopathy. So the thing is, when you don't have doctors, we are able to provide solutions through technology, which I think is super exciting. And we see that as the next trend, right? Because we have a lot of countries that don't have the resources. And we also just talked about outside, how we're losing healthcare professionals.
Right.
Over time, we projected to lose 30% more in the next 3 years. So what do we do in terms of technology to support that gap where you don't have physicians who can help patients? How do we do that? The second aspect was the data aspect, right? I think clinical data has been the largest set of data available since God knows forever. But what have we done with that data? It has been a lot of data sitting in boxes, folders. I think in the last 2 years, one thing we've realized is we have great data. How are we analyzing it? And how are we making it impactful where you're able to take decisions based on that data? And I think a lot of these electronic versions of the data, moving them into the cloud, that has really enabled us to start looking at the data in a more impactful fashion and how that's useful, how can we use it going forward. And it also sets us up nicely for the coming years to say, this is how we want to gather the data. Because I guess the biggest challenge right after COVID, when we started converting the data, was different formats. How do you even look at 5 different sets that don't talk to each other? So a lot of companies came up in that space. And again, innovation was the key in the last 2 years. There was a gap. Companies came through, innovated. So I think that's some of the trends that we see going forward, which are very exciting.
Got it. Yeah, and that point about data is really, really interesting and pertinent. It's not just clinical data. I once upon a time launched this thing called New York Genome Center, and as we were going through New York, talking to the researchers at all the academic institutions about power of sequencing and all this great sequencing data, and then they would sort of kind of shyly point under their desk or their lab bench, and there were a bunch of hard drives connected to nothing with all of their sequencing data. So they're gathering all this data, but then not doing anything with it, right? And so it's important to bring it all together. And Vamsi, we'd love to hear your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, so I appreciate all the points that the other panelists have talked about, real world data and how it can help. So I'm going to just spend a minute on 2 other areas. There's been technological advancements. It's just the kinds of therapies to identify new molecules in the area of ADC, protein degradation, looking at multiple areas where there's advancement in the way that we're trying to treat a particular disease, coupled with, again, I'll go back to AI because we use it quite extensively. I'll give you an example. 5 years ago, when we used to work on, an integrated drug discovery program for some of the large pharma, we used to synthesize close to about 3,000 compounds and then, run them through the test cycle in the biology and figure out that, okay, to get to a lead, it would take probably about 3 years. But today with the AI, drug discovery, AI and ML systems, we're able to actually get to a lead in probably 18 months and file for an IND. With actually the number of compounds that we even synthesize have come down to about 400 molecules all the way from 3,000. So I think there's a huge cost saving coupled with some of these new technologies. I think we're going to see a lot of advancements of drugs hitting the clinic, and which are more efficacious, and as well as the safety profile is much more well established.
Got it. No, thank you. And that's actually a great great segue. That point about being able to get to solutions faster. Clearly that creates gets us to the life-saving technologies faster, but also as we think about the investment landscape, that also provides results or at least progress to those investors faster. And we were just talking about all of the boom in healthcare that's happened over the past few years, which I think has been a bit of a roller coaster, right? We went from healthcare crisis to economic crisis and social crises. 2020 was just chaos. We innovated very quickly across, certainly vaccines, but testing technologies and huge new investments, big successes. Now we're in, I'll call it funding slowdown, but we've all been through many cycles, so I don't want to get stuck in the kids in their first jobs who are worried about this will look like this forever. We've had multiple of these, but what does it look like over the next 12, 18 months in terms of where we should be placing our bets, where investors can be placing their bets? And Vamsi, maybe I'll start with you, just because I think that idea of getting to solutions faster is a really good way to start to get investors even more excited about the industry.
So we work with, we work with a multiple number of customers across the US. Mostly our pockets that we work is the Boston, Cambridge area, the South San Francisco, and San Diego. So I would categorize companies who raised a lot of money. The last 2 years have been great. Startups have raised money into the tune of $50 to $100 million. They've got enough cash to sort of go through this crisis. But there are companies who have just started the fundraise. It's definitely going to be tough for them to sort of close that round of funding. I think most of the companies are looking at non-dilutive funding from NIH and other grants. But the ones that do have the money, I think they can last, and it's just because of the mileage that they get with the money, with technologies. They're able to do a lot more and probably sustain through this sort of temporary slowdown over the next 18 months is the view. But from what we see, the spending companies are actually looking at trying to do meaningful bets on focus on programs rather than going very wide, but focus on certain therapeutic areas where they feel that the safety profile is established and then probably want to move it to clinic. So that's my view. I think there is a slowdown, but it's not as bad as what I had initially perceived. We as a company, we raised capital about 6 months ago from Signet Healthcare Partners in the US, and speaking to the private equity venture capital companies, they have a lot of money, but they're sort of in a pause mode to just wait and see what's happening. But I think if things don't get too bad, I think they'll also get back into investing mode. That's my personal view.
Got it. Thank you for that, and thank you for really mentioning the non-dilutive funding. And I think for the investors in the room, investors in the audience, when you're talking to companies, asking those questions about are they taking advantage of grants, because there really is so much money out there. I've had a number of meetings, even just this week, Biotech Showcase and things with NIH, with NSF, and they continue to say, how do we help get more of these good companies in front of them, because there's tremendous grant dollars available there, and you can 2x, 3x, 5x that venture investment with some early grant dollars. What are you thinking in terms of the financial side?
Yeah, so I think one thing that many tech companies that have entered healthcare have learned is the idea of move fast and break things doesn't necessarily work in healthcare, because ultimately you're dealing with patients' lives and you're dealing with regulators, and ultimately you need to convince somebody to pay for it. So I think what we are seeing is payment is becoming a really critical part of innovation. So there are so many stakeholders, they each have competing incentives, and you really need to make sure that you create a win-win-win situation. But some of the areas, like we were talking about health systems, many of them are now having negative margins with increasing cost of consumables, increasing staffing costs. So companies that we see in terms of investment areas that focus on creating greater efficiency for health systems in terms of staffing, block scheduling, or anything that has to do with increasing throughput, so helping the top line and bottom line, those are immediately compelling to health systems, and therefore really good areas to invest in. Another thing that we are seeing is enabling greater access. So, there's a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion. Many clinical trials are not including diverse subjects because of lack of access. So remote solutions or even retail centers that are creating sort of greater equity in terms of enrolling in clinical trials. Those solutions are very interesting. The trials itself, which Divya can speak to, fast tracking the development cycle. And then ultimately democratizing care, so enabling kind of evening the playing field so that the new surgeon that just graduated can operate with the same level of competency as a more experienced surgeon. I think as an investor, what we look for right now are a lot of our LPs are very risk averse. So we are trying to focus on solutions that, based on these criteria that I described, can reach revenue much faster. They don't have to deal with regulatory risk and can generate traction so that basically the LPs can see their distribution in a shorter period of time. Even if it's not 10x or 20x, it may be 3 to 5x, but see it in 5 years or less rather than a much longer period.
So duration is starting to matter.
Absolutely, yes.
In fact, I support a nonprofit startup accelerator, so I get to see these deals across different sectors. I still would say healthcare is still resilient, because there's lots and lots of opportunities, whether it's accelerating drug discovery to drug development, to having clinical trials done on online, and various, the entire value chain before you get to commercialization on the life sciences side of things. How do you help to accelerate many things, right? Then on the health system side, wherever we have opportunities to bring, if you look at these startups, there are many of these AI startups, they're struggling to get actual data. Without data, you can't really perform analytics, you can't perform AI or build any models. I think this is where the companies who are really creative, and we see them start to collaborate with big life sciences pharma companies or health systems. I think you talked about City of Hope and Mount Sinai sort of hospitals that have corporate venture capital. So we see that the CVCs, like whether it's Johnson Johnson, Merck, they're all funding these good startups. I think this is really going to continue. And my own personal experience, our healthcare business has grown by 33% since last year, and we are looking at another 30% growth next year. So I'm being very positive. Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Perfect. Divya, anything to add?
Completely agree with it. So we saw a lot of new companies come up in oncology space, right, over the last few years. We see more and more companies investing in cell and gene therapy right now. That's the area to be. Anybody and everybody is right there. A lot of the AI, tools, a lot of data, a lot of machine learning being done in that space to really expedite the drug discovery piece of it. But also, I think one other aspect of it is that now more companies are looking at it as a comprehensive thing, not just drug discovery, but how are you going to bring it to the market? So that whole continuum where you would, in the phase 3, start thinking about commercialization has actually squeezed. You start thinking about it more at the phase 1, phase 2 level to see how am I even going to get access? How am I going to get funding? A lot of aspects are now being brought up front. One other thing I do want to mention, as Kian said, we are looking more and more, we do a lot of clinical trials. And one of the key aspects these days is how do we expedite that recruitment? Because that has become a huge challenge for any company you talk to, especially after COVID. Because a lot of the clinical trials went on hold. We had the whole Russia situation where we had to kind of abort sites in Russia, and these patients kind of had to be taken off of the study. So it was a lot of chaos in the last few years. So now looking into it, we look at more and more into predictive analytics kind of tools. We as a company have invested a lot into that aspect on how do we predict which sites would make sure the recruitment happens on time, what kind of patients do we reach out to, how do we find the right pockets of patients through physicians or influencers who we know are very early adapters looking for products that are novel. And not just that, we also look at diversity aspect of it. More and more, even within FDA, there have been products that got a CRL only because the studies were done in a certain country and didn't have like a global population. So more and more we see every regulatory authority wants to see different populations being addressed. So we are also making sure that we incorporate that into the strategy when we present that. We also have certain new roles coming up in the industry where these people are focused on helping the sites recruit diverse population, because the sites, usually the KPIs for the sites was, this is the recruitment rate, this many patients by this date. It never specified what kind of patients. And sometimes it's very hard in rare disease area. It's hard to find a patient. Now we're saying we want to find diverse patients. So it's adding on a lot to the sites as well. So how do we make that easy for them? What can we do digging into the data, how we have recruited in the past, given the disease state, other clinical trials that are ongoing? How do we find the patients fast and get the drug to the market fast so the patients can benefit from it? So that's a few things that we are really focused on.
Yeah, and I want to push on that a little bit more, because I think that's a really important point. And when it comes to diversity, I use a quote a lot. It's not just about healthcare, but when you think about how do you create, what does diversity mean in your company, in your organization, and what they say you should be able to do is get a big room together. Get together in a big room with your company and your customers, your stakeholders. You shouldn't be able to tell the difference. It should just be, this entire group where you really can't tell who's customer, who's company. But it is really hard in the healthcare world, and just getting, especially for rare diseases, as you said, identifying that population. And I think what we need to do is make sure we have diversity in our research population. Diversity in our researchers, diversity in the teams that are working on this. Certainly, diversity in the clinical trials, which ultimately will lead to diverse delivery. But how do we make that happen, given that we were just talking about investors are looking for things faster. We're trying to get the results faster. How do we do that and still make sure that we hit those marks? And I think, Divya, maybe you can just continue that point for a moment.
It's a lot of deep digging into the existing data also, because history a lot of times dictates how the future is going to be. So you can really dig deep with some predictive analytic tools, which is a combination of a lot of different tools. Like, I don't want to say AI is the solution for all. It is not. And to Lena's point, a lot of ML models are there. They have no data. So you don't even know whether the model works or not. So it's a combination of a lot of old and new technology put together where you can, with 99% confidence, say this will work. So you come up with a plan. How good is the plan and how fast can you execute on it will actually get you to faster recruitment with the right kind of mix of patients.
I think they've mentioned in the past in some of these panels that there's a real big problem in healthcare, what they call data lakes.
Yeah.
Or the data just isn't connected to each other.
Exactly.
It's not the same organization of the data, so it's hard to get them to be combined, et cetera.
We just talked about that earlier, right? It was like so many different kinds of data were trying to be pulled together. So I think now we're in a better place in the last 2 years where we have better like hub and spoke models where we can say, okay, this is how you connect with all different kinds of data and bring them to the same format.
Including patient-generated data. So, especially with rare diseases or anything that these patient support groups, patients like me and companies like that over the years, which are collecting those data.
So that's an excellent point too, right? Recently, I read this study. So patient-generated data now with all the variables and everything. Mm-hmm. When you do a controlled clinical trial, you have certain points of monitoring, you have that data. Now, when you compare to the user-generated data, it's 333% of that amount of data being generated. It's continuous because there's no point of time you're looking at, but then the quality of data sometimes is in question and we can't use that data all the time. But going back to our initial point, there is so much data. So you have to weed out what's relevant, what's impactful, and what's useful, because not all of that data is useful. So doing that also is a very key fact.
And back to AI, hopefully to automate some of that to take that burden away from the physician.
Yeah, I think the one concern I have is the entire thing about this AI ethics, right? There should not be any more discriminations until the regulations come in. That's one of the conversations we've been engaged in when we talk about really introducing AI into the mix. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one comment. I'm as a technologist, I get very excited about AI and new technologies, but I think we are really seeing a shift happen in the ecosystem, that players are recognizing that they cannot do things alone. So for example, when it comes to clinical trials and improving diversity of patients, we've seen a lot of solutions with remote monitoring where the patient doesn't have to drive to a clinical center. They can use their cell phone and all of that. Those are all great. But one of the most interesting examples that I saw in enhancing diversity was enabling retail pharmacies like CVS and Walgreens to act as clinical trial centers, right? That doesn't take a whole lot of sexy technology. It's just a collaboration between pharma and retail to say everybody has a Walgreens within 5-10 miles. So why not use the infrastructure that exists and then enhance it with data?
Vamsi, any thoughts on that?
No, I think the whole, most of them covered, most of the speakers covered the points, but one area which I see a lot of progress is the decentralized clinical trials and the ability to identify which is the right subject and not in a much more faster way with technology is definitely helping both in diversity and recruitment. I think it will only get better with technology. I do understand that there are some loopholes with some of these AI ML, but I think we're on the right path as we progress going forward in the next 3 to 5 years. They're going to have a huge financial impact in the way that we spend money in clinical trials and get to results which are meaningful.
Got it. Thank
you. All this dovetails into the conversation we have happening next from Tom Farb, where he's getting down to a very microscopic level on identifying data and also on being able to make sure you're looking at the same data all the time. So the uniformity, data kind of needs a platform, right?
Right.
And that's the real big problem right now is that we have a lot of people who, as I said, everybody's doing individual measurements, everybody's got their own data lakes, and none of it's uniform. But if there was a platform that said, this is what you need to do using all of your devices, and these outcomes should all be this way, that makes a really big difference to your ability to gather the data, right? So, but I run, you guys talk about AI, we are running so many machine learning applications right now. It's phenomenal. Everything is machine learning, and predictive analytics.
Yeah.
But you first have to clean the data because data is awfully messy.
Right.
The word in AI is, or statistics, you get to normalize the data.
Exactly.
Make sure it's all the
Standardize
same,
it.
right?
Yeah, we were talking about unstructured data earlier, and just I think we do have this patient data. We've got obviously all of the monitors and things like that, but the unstructured notes about a patient, in hospital, those are some of the most valuable information. But how do you actually turn that into something that you can leverage without having to use a lot of AI to process it?
So there are a few companies that have come up that actually look at the unstructured data, and they can actually get that into your systems in a format that you can use it. So that part is very exciting. I think there are so many smaller companies that are filling those gaps, which became very evident in the last few years. And that's the exciting part. So we are getting there.
Perfect. So we just got a couple more minutes here. So I'd love just to hear from everyone, 2 really quick questions. So one, what are you most excited about making happen, not seeing happen, but making happen over the next 5 years? And then, what are you looking for from the audience? Just where can they help? And let's start here.
Yeah. So first of all, I think as an investor, this is the best time to invest in this sector. A lot of the value compression that we saw in the market will unfortunately eliminate some companies, but we've had a major dilution of talent across so many companies that were kind of trying to do the same thing. So now we will see more concentrated effort across these really critical unmet needs. So I think that's very exciting for me. And in terms of what I would want from the audience, I would love to stay in touch. And I'm potentially going to launch a new fund. So I would love to engage with all of you.
I echo the same thing. I think where I see there is a there's a lot of needs around coming up with the innovative data or machine learning models for the future in healthcare. I was very surprised when I saw Amazon and Google launching data exchanges where you can get some cancer research data for $1 million. So I think the privacy and security is something of real importance that this has been a conversation in the boardrooms and executives of hospitals. So which is, I see some good signs toward that. So hopefully, if you are a startup company involved in cybersecurity space, I think there's a lot of opportunities in healthcare. I'll be happy to talk to anyone who's of interest or connecting with the investors or working with me on the early stage. I'll be happy. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I guess I'm most excited about bringing some really novel therapies to market. A lot of work happening in that area, and we support a lot of companies with that. So I'm super excited about that. In the next 4 or 5 years, we'll see a lot of innovative products come to market. What I need from the audience, just let me know if you have any questions. I'm very passionate about pharma, new novel therapies, bringing those to patients. So anything I can do to help you answer your questions, I'm here. So
Perfect.
thank you.
Vamsi.
Yeah, so for us, I think the globe has become a flat place to do business. I think skill sets across the world have been appreciated in this COVID time, and we're able to collaborate with our scientists in Boston and India and San Francisco to create really valuable solutions. What we're looking at is really to look at some of these new technologies and actually support companies to be able to quickly get to IND, and so that they can license it out or partner with some of the big companies. Some of the bets that we're going to take in the future is also going to be risk-based collaborations with biotech companies. And what would I like from this audience is if they're investors who are looking at sort of investments that are quite well de-risked, where there's a POC established. I mean, we come across so many companies, and we always have good targets that we want to collaborate with in conjunction to working with some investors.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think just I'll end with mine, because I'm seeing a lot of I'm a data guy, and this idea of connectivity of wearable data and genomic data and EHR data and everything we've been talking about. I think we're finally getting to this point where we can pull it together and do some things to help make decisions. So I'm excited to make that happen, especially in LA. And there's a lot happening in LA. Nardo Montalato's here, investor in health tech and quantum computing, and there's a lot happening in LA. So please, if you're coming to LA, if you need connections in LA, please reach out. And Marty, thank you so much for having us here. Thank you all. Great, and we'll talk soon.